On behalf of the Media India Center for Research and Development and on behalf of all its trustees and office bearers, we extend a very hearty welcome to all of you here to this afternoon's memorial lecture. As many of you must be remembering, he passed away in 2008, but since then every year we assemble here to pay homage to his memory. And I can easily say, because we are involved in organizing so many programs, that this program does not need that much of effort to collect people, because they come on their own, most of them. So it's really a privilege for all of us to have all of you here. Our main speaker today is Dr. B.P. Singh, a former Home Secretary of the Government of India and then Governor of Sikkim. I am very fortunate to have known him for nearly 2 decades, when as the Secretary Culture he was also the Chancellor of Central Institute of Higher Tibetan Studies at Varanasi. And then later on, for the last 10 years, we have been meeting very frequently as we established another trust known as Foundation for Non-Violent Alternatives. So he has been guiding us and helping us in a number of activities. We welcome Dr. B.P. Singh here to deliver this lecture. Ambassador Mehrotra, I think he is very well known to most of you. He has been a very great friend of Sri Upendra Vajpayee for many, many years, and we all lived together in a campus which was also built due to the initiative taken by Sri Upendra Vajpayee. Mr. Ram Mohan Rao is the President of Media India Center for Research and Development and has also been helping us and guiding us in working out or planning its activities, which were very dear and near to Sri Vajpayee. With these remarks, I will request Ambassador Mehrotra to say a few words, and then Dr. B.P. Singh will deliver this afternoon's lecture.
हाँ यहीं से बोलते हैं. Dear friends, I am glad and most grateful to Aruna ji for associating me with this program this year like all previous years. I have known Mr. Upendra Vajpayee as a legend, and whatever you might do, it is very difficult to do justice to the character of the nation. His great hallmark was courage, and he could stand up to the highest authority of the country in order to be able to tell the truth and make it known to us. Very few of us would claim to have that quality. We all are familiar with truth, which has many facets. But the minute we find that it will hurt someone, we shirk. Our consciousness shrinks. We find ourselves short of words. But this man stood up and was never short of words, primarily because he was never short of commitment. His commitment was complete and total to Mother India, and probably to no one else as much as to Mother India. He stood as a champion of India's fight for freedom. He joined the great national movement for the freedom of India under a great leadership and made his contributions from every precinct wherever he was in his lifetime. His journey as a journalist is known to you all, and I don't have to deliberate on it. Nor do I wish to stand in between you and Mr. B.P. Singh, whom you are waiting and wanting to listen with an eager heart. There is something in common between Mr. B.P. Singh and myself. Apart from being colleagues of Central Government of India Services, All India Services, I coming from the Indian Foreign Service, and he coming even from the more distinguished Indian Police Service, and the Indian Administrative Service, my more distinguished anyway. I bow to him for all the knowledge and experience that he has gathered. But there are two things that are common in me. I started my career with Sikkim, he ended it up with Sikkim. And secondly, he was chairing an institute of Tibetan studies in one of the most sacred cities of India, Varanasi, and the most ancient one. And again, I was studying as a student at the Institute of Tibetology, Gangtok. So the difference is between the chair, the high chair that he occupied, and the status of a student and a scholar and a seeker of knowledge and truth at the very bottom of the ladder. So, but these two connections are eternal. My friend, I will not ever endeavor to break them. I hope that you won't too. The subject today for us is peace in the 20th century. 21st century. 20th century never had any peace. We hope for it in the 21st century, and I'm sure that our distinguished speaker will enlighten us on how we can achieve it at a time of the greatest turmoil in one of our periods of history, through which we are living. And he will give us the mantra, the key, as to how we can achieve peace in the midst of troubled waters. I invite him from the bottom of my heart and wish him all the very best.
Ambassador Mehrotra, my senior and distinguished diplomat of the country, Mr. Rao, Mr. P.N. Tandon, Arunaji, Sri H.K. Dua, and I see so many distinguished friends here in the audience. I join all of you in paying my tribute to the memory of Sri Upendra Bajpayee, Pandit Ji, to his friends and admirers this evening. Sri Upendra Bajpayee moved from freedom struggle to the freedom of expression. He was a very well-known journalist of distinction and dedication who was much sought after in the early decades of the Indian Republic. His quest for truth and integrity in expression are well known and worthy of emulation by young journalists. He was an exceptional human being who endeared himself to everyone who came in contact with him. He personified the qualities of Ganga Jamuni Tahjeeb in his behavior that he carried along with the mannerisms of Lucknow, a place where he lived for long. He was the founder of the Media Center for Research and Development, of which Mr. Rao is the president. Arunaji, his wife, and other trustees of the Media Center for Research and Development are guardians of the flame of Upendra Bajpayee's reputation as a journalist committed to the ideals of constitutional democracy and fearless expression of views. I would like all of you to join me in applauding their efforts. I have chosen an important but difficult subject, peace in the 21st century. I am delighted to see the quality of audience in the hall, as I see the presence of so many distinguished leaders of the media and several scholars who are well versed in the world affairs. They are known for clinical evaluation of ideas in India and in the wider world of knowledge seekers. But this, however, has not lightened my task. But I submit myself to their test. The contours of the 21st century were led in 1990s as profound transformations in ideas and institutions, religion and geopolitics, globalization and trade set the conditions for future. Even as we must fully comprehend the past, there is no way in which the past can be separated from the present. The past and present are entities which always coexist, and each informs the other. Each implies the other, and each coexists with the other. For instance, the three happenings of the closing years of the 20th century have immense significance for the 21st century. These are the fall of Berlin Wall in 1989, the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, and the transfer of Hong Kong to China in 1997. Friends, by sheer coincidence of luck or good fortune, I got attracted to this concept when I became Culture Secretary during 1995-97. I had then articulated that the closing years of the 20th century have altered the power equation. People like Francis Fukuyama called it the end of history. I had then said and written in an essay called Harmony Among Civilizations, which was published in India and abroad, which has countered Samuel Huntington's famous thesis of the clash of civilizations. And to my surprise, one day, I get a call from him. I was then Culture Secretary. And he said he would like to meet me to discuss this concept. So here in the India International Center, we had a long chat. He was not convinced about my argument, nor I was about his. A year later, I moved from culture to home, and he again came. But I had no time, so I said, I can only meet you in office, because I couldn't have kept any other appointment. So he came and we had a pleasant chat. And he thought that as Culture Secretary, I thought harmony is possible I may have changed my mind as Union Home Secretary because I have to deal with terrorism. He was disappointed that I hadn't changed my views. Then my book was published, India's Culture, the State, the Arts and Beyond, which has a chapter by this title, Harmony Among Civilizations. And that attracted Fukuyama, and by then I had moved to the World Bank. So Fukuyama came to find out whether India is following the culture policy that I have enunciated. I said, that I can't guarantee. But what I can guarantee is the people of India are following that policy. And that is what gives me a strength. Why I am narrating this is only to tell you that even at that time, and that's a part of the book which I had articulated in a seminar by Fiki, that in future a country will be rated high in the Committee of Nations, which has economic power more than the military power. So I had then said market, military and culture, and I had also said culture will challenge both. And that happened, but not in the manner in which I had envisaged. It happened more as Huntington had envisaged, not as Fukuyama had visualized. Because when we discussed in World Bank this, he was, when I told him that the way it is unfolding, it looks that your theory and my theory will be proved wrong. Why I am saying so, that we in India were instructed by Mahatma Gandhi and other freedom leaders, and Upendra Bajpayee would be one of them, that you don't have to hate the British, you have to hate the colonial system. But that was not the training given in other countries where people thought otherwise, that we have been exploited because we believe in a particular religion. We have been exploited because we have resources like oil and gas. And since the Second World War, balance of power, which had so far favored the domination of the Western nations, particularly the United States over the rest of the world, is changing. This domination, in fact, is gradually declining. And other powers, namely China, Russia, Japan, India, Brazil, Iran, and Indonesia, are seeking recognition. China has already declared its intention to be a lead power. Russia too wants respect from the Committee of Nations as a major power, as it was during the Soviet Union era. Many people believe that the 21st century will belong to Asia. Addressing the global meet on peace, security, and human development in Seoul last year, I said that it is logical to hold that economic power would shift to Asia in the 21st century. But as I find, I then said that geopolitical problems have come ahead of it, and we are struggling with that. The 21st century actually commenced on January 1, 2001, and shall end on December 31, 2100. However, according to several peace experts, the real commencement of the 21st century began on Thursday, September 11, 2001, when terrorists bombed World Trade Center in New York, hit Pentagon, the U.S. Defense Headquarters in Washington, D.C., and ravaged on a field in Pennsylvania, along with the banks of the Potomac in the United States, that killed nearly 3,000 people. The authors of 9/11 Commission report described it as a new type of war. Since then, from Mumbai to Brussels, from Paris to Pathankot, London, and various other cities have faced terrorist attacks and worse, and this phenomena is continuing. The fundamental issue of the 21st century is how to promote an environment that is conducive to maintenance of peace and harmony. Peace is not simply the absence of war or cessation of conflicts among nation states. Peace is an essential quality that should characterize human activities as the world faces several issues: political, religious, economic, and cultural. Peace can be secured firmly only in a wider environment where injustice, inequality, and exploitation are tackled effectively, and there is freedom of expression and dignity of human life. To my mind, the future of peace and harmony in the 21st century would be directly linked to issues concerning 1. Poverty and increasing inequality, 2. Ecology, global warming and climate change, 3. Nuclear weapons, emerging technology of warfare and continuing arms race among nation states, 4. Geopolitics and nationalism, and 5th, religious extremism. During the concluding decades of the 20th century, developments in technology, particularly the internet, market, finance and business, politics and political conclaves, and increasing role of NGOs in public affairs, secured to undermine the role of geography, nationalism, and nation states. This process is being reversed. Nationalism is a very powerful political ideology that guides both the people and the holders of political power. We have to recognize that more people live and pursue their work firmly rooted in a village or a city. People continue to attach great value to classics, folklore, and folk tales that are associated with their country, its geography and culture. Global politics is rapidly changing both in character and content. Threats to peace are visible in different parts of the world due to geopolitical ambitions of nation states. There is also greed for access to and control over natural resources, particularly gas and oil. The geopolitical scene in the world has often been complicated due to interplay of religion, historical legacies, and radical views. 3 events of the second decade of the 21st century, however, establish the changing realities of geography and nationalism and complexities of religious phenomenon. First, the merger of Crimea in Russia in March 2014 generated fears about peace and tranquility in Europe and beyond. Notwithstanding the fact that Ukraine is vital to Russia's strategic interests, the environment of peace and trust would get stressed if Russia goes to further extend its borders in Ukraine. Second, China's claims over South China Sea and islands that Japan considers its own are other developments reminiscent of a game of geopolitics of the preceding century. Third, the Islamic State of Iraq and Assam, ISIS, a jihadi militia of Sunni Muslim groups in Syria set up in June 2014, has conquered large parts of territory in Syria and across northern and western Iraq. It is clear that Syria and Iraq by themselves cannot contain the ISIS, as military conflict between the Sunni and Shia sects have gone beyond and have spread to several countries of the Arab world as well as North Africa. The ISIS-led jihadi militant groups are posing big threats to countries of Asia and Europe than even what Al-Qaeda did. The ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Taliban and numerous other terrorist groups are active in the Arab world India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Europe and China. No wonder in 2015 over 90 countries experienced terrorist attacks. Today the ISIS has some 30,000 fighters, holds territory in both Iraq and Syria, maintains extensive military capabilities and finances, controls lines of communication, commands infrastructure, and engages in sophisticated military operations. By the end of 2015, roughly 25,000 foreigners from Arab countries and 5,000 from Western countries had fought with ISIS in Iraq and Syria, and the ranks of outsiders is growing. These fighters act as communication channels, bringing local concerns to ISIS and Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi's vision back to their countries of origin when they return. It needs to be emphasized that the number of terrorist organizations as well as their personnel are on the rise. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT 1970, the cornerstone of the global non-proliferation regime and nuclear deterrence, are coming under increasing stress. Once a rogue terrorist unit gets access to weapons of mass destruction, the entire peace scenario would undergo sea change. The need to make foolproof arrangements for the safety and security of nuclear material cannot be overemphasized. And today, the world leaders are meeting in Washington, D.C. to precisely undertake this task. The matter is in public discourse, but no major power and or the UN system has given credible assurances in this behalf. Then there is another aspect. Since 9/11, the Western powers have spent trillions of dollars in securing peace and democracy in Afghanistan and Iraq alone. On the average, $100 billion are spent every year in securing the world from terrorists, but peace is still elusive. The Afghanistan phenomenon has clearly indicated that a small country, by using the emotive power of religion, can jeopardize the peaceful environment in different parts of the globe. The establishment of the caliphate by the ISIS in 2014 has added to the enormity of the problem, as we are having a situation where Muslims are killing Muslims. Thankfully, the dialogue among leaders of major political powers, along with those of Syria, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Saudi Arabia, have begun at Geneva and will help facilitate making of an informed choice about geopolitical issues. This would, however, in my view, need to be supplemented by believers of different faiths and sects and diverse ethnic or national backgrounds coming together in a spirit of harmony, highlighting the continuing need for dialogue, cooperation, and peace. For when moral imperatives are demanded from people, their leaders move in the direction of making right choices and indicating preferences. The moot question is, how should we live? How do we control human nature that involves violent conflict and threatens peace? How do we subordinate sectarians and ethnic loyalties to work for harmony among people? How can love and compassion be made to prevail over oppression and exploitation? How do we get engaged in a dialogue on a constant basis? Is military alone capable of securing peace and calming the passion fueled by the mix of geopolitics and religion? Haven't we entered into an era of revenge and vengeance as this new type of war is continuing. While I support the use of force to contain acts of terrorism, but this has to be done not arbitrarily, but in terms of law and in tandem with international and institutional legal framework. That is what the UN Charter enjoins upon all member states. Would hatred and revenge solve the Islamic fundamentalism and herald an era of peace? The answer is in the negative and is obvious. The Syrian refugee problem has clearly established that several of the Western leaders have clearly lost the significance of empathy. It is not that understanding violence requires appreciation of religious schisms, not only between Christianity and Islam, but also between the Shias and Sunnis of Islam. In my view, religions and sects within a religion have to be understood and kept in focus to formulate grammar of action to contain terrorism at the level of mind. These unprecedented challenges call for a new, bold, and imaginative statecraft from leaders. I have propounded the Bahudhai approach in this behalf. I take this opportunity to share this concept with you, although you may perhaps be aware of it. The Bahudhai approach has interesting origins, as it happened because I had gone to attend a seminar like this. It was a seminar, not a memorial lecture. And in Washington, D.C. And I was asked, this was just after 2 weeks of the 9/11 attack, there was some fear in the environment. And people wanted a coalition of nation states to tackle this problem. The chairperson was known to me, and she, after the learned professor had spoken, started praising India, that how India has been the home of pluralism and different faiths. And then she said that I am there, I was former Home Secretary of the Government of India and also an author, and gave me the floor, saying that I may have the answer. I recall having said then that while India may have the answer, I do not, and went on to narrate my experiences in handling terrorism in India. I was then aware of the inadequacy of my response, and when I came back to India after completing my term in the World Bank, for the next 4 years, I was searching for what is the answer. And then I found this term Bahudha from that Rigved, Ekam Sad Vipra Bahudha Vadanti. And I said, forget Ekam Sad and go on Bahudha. And I found that India is not only home of different faiths and belief systems, it has been continuously facing a state-sponsored, supported terrorism from Pakistan since 1980s. Yet, India never abandoned the path of dialogue at the level of two governments and among the people of two countries. In my reading of the Bahudhai approach, and this is supported by research and field visits, which I undertook for 41 days of the villages of India, the Bahudhai approach recognizes that there is a distinction between plural societies and pluralism. Pluralism is an inevitable ingredient of democratic societies. The role of religion, language and ethnicity is very significant in plural societies. Pluralism in this context is an imperative for both developed and developing societies. Pluralist societies are necessarily multi-ethnic multi-religious and multilingual societies. In such societies, there are various boundaries: racial, linguistic, religious, and at times even ideological. The Bahudaya approach does not believe in annexation or transgression of boundaries, or assimilation of identities and propagation of a simplistic worldview. It merely facilitates dialogue and thereby promotes understanding of the collective good. The realization of one's own identity may sustain boundaries, and yet at the same time, understanding of other identities may help formulate a public policy of harmony. The Bahudaya approach is conscious of the fact that societies without boundaries are not possible. The culture of Bahudaya is deeply rooted in inculcation of a special attitude from an early age. Dialogue requires a state of mind where one can strongly believe in one's own way of looking at issues while simultaneously accommodating another person's point of view. It is this mental discipline that makes one willing to consider the validity of the other person's viewpoint. In short, Bahudaya approach is both a celebration of diversity and an attitude of mind that respects another person's point of view. Democracy and dialogue are central to this approach. In my view, the problem lies in overemphasizing the commonly shared belief among believers of various religions that there is only one truth. There may not be any problem in supporting Ekam Sat so long as it relates to the quest for truth. However, problems arise in its practice. Most of the religions have a single God and a single scripture. The believer of such a religion thinks that their God is supreme and that their scripture contains all the truth. The fundamentalist groups go on to insist on a scrupulous adherence to every tenet of the scripture, notwithstanding enormous changes in ground realities based on new discoveries, negating age-old beliefs and prescriptions. A scripture is a man-made document formulated by a saint in his state of enlightened consciousness. Such a document cannot be applicable to all times and to all people. It may not contain answers to all human problems of an interdependent world. Sri O.P. Tandon mentioned about my role in Sarnath, and I thought that I should go there to explain the Bahudaya approach. I went there, Mr. Tandon. And then I was governor. The organizers had assembled all the top scholars, and I found that in my audience I had two Mahamahopadhyayas and various other learned people. When I said, forget Ekam Sat, go for Bahudaya, there was something that who is this man who can, repudiate Rigveda? So somebody asked me a question, not Mahamahopadhyayas, the two of them themselves, but one of their disciples. So I told them that I am not going beyond Rigveda. I have said this because of this reason. And later during lunch I found that the Mahamahopadhyayas were appreciative of this Bahudaya approach. Later I wondered whether it was out of deference to my position as governor, or it was because of the Bahudaya approach. I don't know the answer as yet. In my view, Bahudaya approach will apply to both believers and non-believers. I see relevance of the Bahudaya approach both for believers and non-believers. In fact, I have consciously taken it out from the religious closet of conflicts among religions and conflicts within a religion to the secular realm. I see efficacy of the Bahudaya approach in dealing with differences of opinion among the sects of various religions. In making Bahudha, an instrument of public policy, I would like to emphasize two aspects. First, tolerance is a common feature of all great civilizations. And second, that we need a genuine and mutually sympathetic interfaith dialogue. The purpose is to understand the differences and find common grounds for peaceful coexistence. It implies that leaving religion out of the public debate would be a grave mistake. It will deprive us of a critical source of establishing social harmony and mutual understanding. Bahudha can become a guiding principle in education, national politics, and international organizations. And then I have gone on in my book, Bahudha in the Post 9/11 World, to write 4 separate chapters, how Bahudha can be secured. And I don't have that much time to tell you that, but these are 4. One is religious harmony. Second is educational programming. Third is strengthening of international political architecture, the United Nations. And fourth is the use of military power in terms of the UN Charter. The Bahudha approach, I believe, can flourish when decent and ethical people that include a large segment of the global population, both among believers and non-believers, support it. For the Bahudha approach is relevant to all those who believe that one can be a good person as well as a good citizen, both and without being religious. The number of people who see in the Bahudha approach the potential of opening a series of opportunities for resolution of conflicts and for building a harmonious society and a global order, as against the widely publicized theory of the clash of civilizations, is on the rise. Friends, I have taken more of your time than I had anticipated. Let me therefore conclude. Science and technology, market innovations, aspirations of the people, and the religious and cultural values of the nation states would need effective resolution mechanisms. The world leaders must realize that the theory of nuclear deterrence, which has worked satisfactorily so far, may perhaps need to have additional sensitivity, keeping human welfare in view, particularly in view of its falling into the hands of rogue elements. In this broad context, the global system represented by the United Nations and its agencies and the regional groupings would be required and in fact undergo massive changes during the 21st century. New innovations are taking place. Longevity is on the rise. Removal of poverty, disease, and ignorance is within human capabilities, and the need to eradicate is a part of our consciousness. We also know that we have the capacity to build peace, as also the capacity to avert ecological crisis. Peace is a prerequisite for every positive initiative. The world is wide enough for all people to live together if the ideas of racial pride and animosity are kept in control. All the civilizations are inspired by the lofty ideas of oneness of the world. Let us realize that the era of domination of one over the other is over. Towards this, the change of heart on the part of the world leaders is really called for. Leaders endowed with spiritual resources can strengthen the cause of peace and people's welfare. They can think outside the traditional boxes of faith and scriptures, paradigms of democracy and dictatorship, and so on, by invoking the paramount need of the people to live in peace. Would the 21st century have enough leaders in different walks of life to take our people to follow the right path? Or would the world be guided by demagogues and fascists, a phenomenon that we witnessed in the 20th century? The challenge is clearly before all of us, and we have to harness a spiritual energy to make the world a better place to live. History shows that human societies have withstood crisis from time to time. There are possibilities that people in coming years would have greater participation through democratic institutions, and in the process it may lead to innovation and establishment of new institutions. I know that tyranny and terrorism, wickedness and hatred can always enter in the affairs of men. The one thing that can prevent it is a large body of resolute men and women in the world, a group of people who believe that if hatred can be spread and taught, love can also be taught and spread. Another positive trend is the present generation of people think about the future. And the more we think about the future, more we expand our outlook of what we should do to save the future. And I must like to compliment the world leaders who went for the formulation of the Millennium Development Goals from 2001 to 2015 and Sustainable Development Goals from 2015 to 2030. I am deeply aware of the fact that one cannot predict events. History has a marvelous capacity to undo what one wishes to happen. I am aware that persecution, torture, and killing are taking place in various parts of the world. And this is a reality that cannot be whisked away by waving a white flag. And yet I am hopeful that the 21st century would be better for both humans and ecology. It would ensure people's welfare better than the preceding ones. It is my belief that the dogs of war and conflict will bark and may occasionally bite in the 21st century, but will not prevail as they did in the preceding century. We are not looking for a perfect world or a world without borders. We cannot envisage a world without conflicts or natural disasters. All we want is to augment the number of men and women of goodwill who are capable of solving problems and to expand their reach and influence, starting from schools to public policy formulation areas. I strongly feel that the strengthening of open societies, where dialogue has primacy, and where the spirit of understanding another's point of view is cultivated, leads to a better world. Fundamentalism, or that a particular view of the world must prevail, is the worst of all values and must be discarded. The need is to resolve that as a people we will not allow our respective faiths to be used as an instrument of violence. We must have the moral strength to live in accordance with the teaching of compassion and spend all our energies to work for peace and development. Let us bring unity in our efforts towards that end. I thank you for your attention.
Dr. B.P. Singh, distinguished scholar, besides being an eminent administrator. I've known him for nearly 3 decades of his service where we are working together. Ambassador Mehrotra, who has been a distinguished diplomat promoting peace in this region as Secretary General of the SAARC, and Mr. B.P. Tandon, who has been, with whom I was associated with the media center's work. It has been an education for us to listen to B.P. Singh today. He has reviewed the events in the 20th and the first 2 decades of the 21st century, how humanity has fought in various conflicts, how they found peace, and today we are in a dilemma. How to have peace in the world. It's not been easy. We have great powers who are selfish and provoke the most evil thoughts in some human beings. This has been the cause of the World Trade Center bombing. And following that, the big powers have fought in various parts of the world and did not allow peace to prevail. Since the Gulf War, we are aware how we have gone through various events. We have tried to establish peace in the subcontinent. But again, it has not been possible. Conflicts have been prevailing in the subcontinent from the 60s onwards, in spite of our leaders Mahatma Gandhi's efforts, Jawaharlal Nehru's efforts, and our various prime ministers, their efforts to see that we continue dialogue with our neighbors. Sir, I sincerely hope that people like you will help us in making efforts to establish peace. Lastly, I would like to say a few words about Upendra Vajpayee. I have worked along with Upendra Vajpayee, even though I was in the government and Upendra Vajpayee was a journalist. We met each other almost every other day, interacting how to project information, how to project governance in the country through the newspapers. Mr. Vajpayee, I must confess, told me one day that, look, as far as journalists are concerned, we can be objective in reporting if we have no tension to live and look after ourselves. Looking after ourselves is a roof over our head. He established Saket, the press center, and where many of us are living. Later, he established the National Media Center in Gurgaon. Today, we are remembering him for establishing these two places and made us contribute to the society as media people. Vajpayee ji, thank you very much. We will always cherish your memory, and I would like to thank all of you to have come here, participate in this evening in our function. Thank you.
May I call upon Rajni Tandon, his niece, to propose a vote of thanks.
Friends, on behalf of the President and Trustee of Media India Centre for Research and Development, I thank Honorable Dr. B.P. Singh Ji for his invaluable contribution in today's memorial lecture, as also the insight he has given us into the subject of environment and peace and harmony in 21st century. This has been a very educating and informative informative session. Special thanks to our guests and friends for once again being with us on this very special day, which we all celebrated as an evening of get-together during the lifetime of my uncle, Shri Upendra Bajpayee, and now in his memory as a day of learning. Thank you once again, and I'll request all of you to join us for a cup of tea now. Thank you very much.